10-minute sci-fi terrain. The idea is we're going to do a batch job of these, 3 different colours, but all done at the same time. And total, the aim is not to spend more than say 10 to 15 minutes per item. And we want to take these simple gang boxes from Bunnings, which only cost a couple of dollars, they're like a wall mount box for electrical switches, and turn them into something just like this, with very little work, and even some cool lighting effects. So follow on to see what happens. Green Stuff World, scratch brushes. I start by removing any serial numbers or markings that will make it look out of scale. I like to use the Gorilla Glue's super glue pen because it reduces the amount of things that I stick to myself. In-scale diamond plate from Green Stuff World. This corrugated paper makes for great in-scale corrugated iron. Here I'm using Dulux Duramax clear plastic primer with a flat black prime and then with a xenophil of grey cere. I mainly like to use liquitex paints when making terrain. I find they give a great quality of paint, almost as good as miniature paint, but work out quite a bit cheaper. Using sponge brushes, I apply 2 or 3 coats and then use a stippling brush to jam up into the tight corners. I find this provides a great texture, which will help with later steps. I then highlight with a dry brush of brighter colours. For masking, I use Tamyia 6mm tape. I make sure that I allow plenty of drying time and I don't push it on too hard. I then use a stippling technique, starting with grey and working up to white. You don't have to wait for it to fully dry between coats, just keep working your way up. Once dry, I then just hold a simple airbrush stencil in place and use a felt tip pen to draw in the guidelines for the hazard stripes. You can then use a flat tip brush to draw in the dark lines. I find it much easier than using a pointed brush. For the black, I use Vallejo model colour, German grey, with their acrylic thinning medium. Remember to start on the masking tape and pull down. Don't stress too much about perfect lines, just get it done and tidy up with a touch of white later. You will find the sharpness you get from the masking tape makes the whole thing look sharp. Once dry, I splodge on some cyan and yellow contrast paint. I wait 5 minutes and then pull the tape. Don't forget to use brush soap, especially after contrast paint. I lost the footage for the wash stage. I used 3 parts of Null oil, 3 parts Agrax Earthshade, 3 parts Lamia medium, and then 1 part Drakenhof Nightshade. Here I'm giving the areas that I imagine will get high wear a quick dry brush of lead nupture. Now for weathering. I used a combination of the Dirty Down products, Dirty Down Rust, then verdigris, then I used the moss effects on the lower parts, and once that all started to dry up, I used the yellow rust effect to highlight the rust. Once it all dried up and I could see the tea staining, I came in with my wet brush and softened the edges. For the posters, I used a watery mix of PVA glue and matte Mod Podge, then positioned them with my brush. Once they'd settled into position, I would then conform them to the contours of the project by prodding them with the brush. For the final stage of weathering, I used Vallejo's Streaking Grime. I used it to darken the edges of the posters, and then I would just put splodges around wherever I thought grime would naturally occur. I then came in with drops of water off my brush and from a pipette and let them naturally streak down the sides. Once that was done, I then used a bit of paper towel to suck up where there was too much. To seal it all up, I used some matte varnish from Vallejo. I think these are looking great, but I want to add a final flair. I've got some coloured film and I'm going to super glue it inside and then combine it with some flickering tea candles. It'll look great in dim light conditions. So that's it. Didn't quite take 10 minutes, more like 20 minutes per piece, but I think they do look great. They've got rust and weathering effects, posters and details, and look great in scale for 28mm. I do have one more to do though, and I have a plan to cheat and to try and do it in like 5 minutes using some funky spray can effects. So subscribe to see it in the next video.